Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. In tonight's episode, I'm sharing 10 true and deeply unsettling stories, all set in small towns across the Appalachian Mountains. These aren't just haunted houses or ghost sightings. These are places people grew up in and barely escaped. But before we begin, hit subscribe, leave a like, and tell me where you're listening from, because one of these stories might have happened just a few miles from your door. Thank you for being here. Now then, let's begin. My name is Jesse M. I was 28 when I moved back to Matewan, West Virginia, the town where my grandmother raised my mom and 3 aunts. After her stroke, there was no one left to take care of her except me. I put my freelance reporting jobs on pause and packed up my apartment in Richmond, thinking I'd only stay a few months. Matewan was the kind of town where people remembered your face, even if they hadn't seen it in 20 years. The kind where buildings leaned and fog moved slow between hills, and everything important was still passed in whispers. Bridal Church sat just outside town limits, off the old mining road. It had been boarded up since 1997, after the priest was accused of assaulting 3 women. No one was convicted, but they closed the church right after. No sermons since then, just stories. The one I kept hearing was about the offering box. The same rusted metal box that used to sit near the pulpit was still there, chained shut. But somehow, every time someone went missing in the county, another coin showed up inside. Not just any coin. People said they were old, never circulated coins, the kind that shouldn't exist. Last month, a boy from town vanished. 12 years old, never came back. After that, folks started saying the church was cursed again, that if you went near it, something followed you home. I had to check it out. Part of me was just chasing a story, but part of me wanted answers. Grandma never said much about that church, only that it should have been torn down long ago, but someone always made sure it stayed standing. I started asking around. Most people refused to talk on record. One man, the old cemetery caretaker, told me to leave it alone. Said he used to handle the church books, and that place still held secrets no one had touched. He wouldn't say more. I went anyway. Middle of the day, just me and my camera. The church sat squat and sun-bleached, half hidden in fog. Its windows were broken. The doors left cracked like someone forgot to shut them properly. Inside, it smelled like mold and iron. The pews were coated in dust, but nothing looked ransacked. And up at the altar, just like they said, was the offering box. It was square, rusted, chained in a loop that had fused with the metal lid. Something about it made me uneasy, like it didn't belong to the rest of the church anymore. I stepped closer. There were footprints in the dust. One set, very large. They came from the doorway and stopped directly in front of the altar. No prints leading away. I filmed the whole thing, uploaded it to my channel that evening. Just a walkthrough. No theories. No narration. The video got a few hundred views overnight. Nothing viral. But the next morning, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. No subject. Just one sentence. It saw you. That night, my grandmother fell. I found her at the bottom of the stairs, shaken but conscious. She kept mumbling about someone bumping into her. A tall man with a stooped back. I checked the camera feed from outside the house, just in case. At 3:06 a.m., a tall figure stood perfectly still next to our mailbox. In his hands was the same metal offering box I had seen the day before. If someone from a small town tells you not to go near a place, it means one of 2 things. Either they're hiding something, or they're trying to save you. I could not sleep after seeing that footage. Every sound in the house felt louder, sharper, like it was waiting for something to answer back. I kept replaying the image of the man by the mailbox, frozen in the fog, his shoulders bent and heavy. I had seen that shape before. It was the same outline in the dust of the church floor. By dawn, I made up my mind to go back. I needed proof, something I could show to the police, or at least to myself. Grandma was asleep upstairs, and I left a note saying I would be back before noon. I took my flashlight, camera, and a small crowbar from the shed. The fog was thicker that morning. It rolled over the hills like slow breath, hiding the road until I could barely see 10 feet ahead. When I reached Bridal Church, the doors were open wider than before. The lock on the side gate had been broken. Inside, the air was colder. My footsteps echoed in a way they hadn't the first time. I aimed my flashlight toward the altar. The box was still there, but the chain had been cut clean through. Coins were scattered across the floor in a perfect ring. I counted maybe 20 before I realized they were forming a circle. And inside that circle was a small, square hole in the floorboards, like something had been pried open. I crouched and reached toward it when I heard movement above me. Slow steps, wood creaking under weight. I pointed the light toward the staircase leading up to the bell tower. The sound came again. A shuffle, then silence. I started recording as I climbed. The steps groaned under my feet. Near the top, something slammed. The wood beneath me splintered and gave way. I fell hard, crashing through rotted planks into darkness. Pain shoots through my arm as I hit the ground. The flashlight rolls away, spinning light across the room. The floor is covered in coins. Dozens, maybe hundreds, laid out in circles that glint as they catch the beam. In the center, the offering box lies open. The air feels thick and sour. I can hear breathing that is not mine. I turn the light upward. Through the crack in the ceiling, a man's face looks down. His eyes are hidden by shadow, his head tilted like he is studying me. He starts to move, not climbing, but crawling, lowering himself through the gap with his hands gripping the sides. His clothes hang loose, torn and dark. His shoulders twist unnaturally as he lowers himself farther, knees bending the wrong way until his feet touch the coins without a sound. I freeze. He straightens slowly, towering over me, the smell of metal and damp earth filling the space. He lunges. I grab the nearest thing within reach, a broken beam, and swing. It hits his head with a dull crack, but he does not fall. His hand catches my arm, skin cold and slick, and I feel nails digging in. I swing again, harder, until something snaps. The beam slips from my hand and I grab the metal lid of the offering box. Its edge is jagged. I drive it into his neck. He jerks back, choking out a sound that gurgles like air through water. Blood spills over the coins, dark and slow. He collapses to his knees and then backward, face turned toward the ceiling. I crawled toward the broken hatch in the floor and pulled myself through. My knees slipped on the damp boards, but I managed to get out and run. The fog outside swallowed everything. I fell twice before I found the road again, bleeding and shaking. When I reached the house, I locked every door. I sat in front of the camera feed and watched it on loop until the morning came. In one of the clips, I saw myself running toward the porch. Behind me, for a brief second, a dark figure followed through the fog. It stopped 40 seconds before I reached the door. The police searched the church. They found the coins, but no man, no blood, no signs of anyone living there. They told me to rest, said stress could make people see what they feared. I moved out of Matawan 2 weeks later. Grandma went into a care home near Charleston. I thought that would be the end of it. But 3 weeks after I left, I got a call from the neighbor who cleaned her house. She said there was a box sitting in the middle of the library floor. Rusted, a small, chained at the top. Inside were 3 coins and a note in handwriting I did not recognize. It said, "Thank you for returning it." When I came back to Silva, North Carolina, I thought it would be for a long weekend. Just a quick visit to see Morgan, my best friend since middle school, who had taken up work as a technician for the old emergency broadcast relay towers in the valley. He lived alone now, in a canvas frame cabin near the base of Narrow Gap, where the main tower had been out of commission since the early 90s. Something about the quiet suited him, or maybe he just got tired of people. Narrow Gap used to be the signal line for rescue calls across this part of the Blue Ridge. 30 years ago, it went silent after 3 rangers vanished during a storm. All they ever found was a boot and a burned-out radio. After that, the equipment stayed locked up. No one had touched it since. Morgan told me something weird had started happening a few months back. The tower was dead, still off-grid, but every 3 days, at exactly 3:07 a.m., it began broadcasting again, only for a few minutes. No pattern, sometimes static, sometimes voices. It always stopped before sunrise. He asked if I wanted to hear it for myself. I said yes without thinking. We set up an old shortwave recorder and tuned the dial to the old relay band. That night, I stayed in his cabin, pulled a cot next to the wall of tangled wires and dusty monitors. You ever wake up because you hear your name whispered? Not from outside the window, but from inside the radio. Worse than that is when you realize the voice calling you sounds exactly like your own. I did not sleep the rest of the night. We played back the tape the next morning. It was mostly hiss, but then clear as glass came a woman's voice. She said, "No one is alone in Narrow Gap." Morgan froze. He told me that was a line from the final entry in a journal written by one of the rangers who went missing in 1994. We played it again and again, trying to find where it looped or skipped, but it didn't. Then we hit another section, buried deep in the static. This time, it was Morgan's voice. He said things I'd never heard him say, sentences that made no sense, almost like someone had chopped up his words and rearranged them. That night, we didn't try to sleep. We sat with the gear, watching the meters spike without cause. Around midnight, we turned everything off, thinking maybe the stormy weather was just messing with old coils. I went back down to my own cabin below the ridge. But around 2:30, the small radio in my bag clicked on by itself. The voice said, "Morgan's not sleeping. Neither should you." I ran back up the trail in the dark, the radio still hissing in my pack. The fog had dropped lower, thicker than before, and I could barely see more than a few feet ahead. When I reached the tower shack, the door was wide open. The lights were on inside, glowing pale and sick through the window. Morgan was sitting in front of the central monitor. He didn't turn when I called his name. His back was too straight, too still. The screen in front of him was all static. I stepped closer and reached out, but he turned before I touched him. His face looked hollow, not scared, just blank. He stared at me and said, "It's not my voice anymore, Leo." Then the lights went out. A deep groaning sound rolled up from the equipment room below, like metal under strain or something breathing through coils. I reached for my flashlight, and that was when I saw it. A figure, tall and dripping, stood behind the glass of the equipment room. It trembled like a film glitch, then blinked out the moment my light hit it. We did not speak. I grabbed Morgan by the arm, and we ran. We slid down the trail toward my cabin, the gravel slick from old rain. Behind us, the radio on Morgan's back crackled. Footsteps paced in time with ours. Not loud, but steady. Close. Inside the cabin, we killed the lights and sat in the dark, waiting. That was when the radio clicked on again. It played a recording of me screaming. I had never said those words, never made those sounds. But the voice was mine. Morgan stood and smashed the unit against the floor. He looked me in the eye and said, "If it can copy your voice, it can hear what you're thinking." Morning came fast. The sky was too clear, too bright. Birds chirped like nothing had happened. We packed up, shut down every piece of gear. Morgan disconnected the tower's battery leads, even yanked the antenna cable. I drove into town to see my mom before leaving. Told her what had happened, about the signal, the voice, the strange nights. She didn't blink. She just looked at me and said, "Morgan died in '95. Leo. At Narrow Gap. You forgot. I didn't answer her. I just stood there as something cold spread behind my ribs. I drove back to the cabin. It was empty. The equipment was gone. No signs of anyone ever staying there. But in the corner, the old shortwave radio turned itself on. No batteries. No power cord. A voice said, "You never left." I turned and saw myself, sitting in the desk chair, wearing the same jacket, head tilted, earphones on. The light above flickered once, and then everything went black. They found me 2 days later, barefoot, halfway down the trail. I woke up in the hospital. The staff said I had been talking in static. No one came to visit. The chart said I was found alone. No sign of a second person. I told them about Morgan, about the tapes. They told me my full name was Leo Morgan. Now, when I look in the mirror, I sometimes hear both voices speak. Mine, and the one pretending to be me. And they say the same thing every time. We are still there. Before we step into the next story, if you're still here, still listening, with the lights low, maybe drop a comment. Just tell me where you're listening from. It helps more than you know. All right, let's keep going. My name is Lyle. I was 34 when I took the short-term job in Pineville, Kentucky. Nothing dramatic. Just a contract gig surveying utility lines and underground drainage for a highway project. I had done these kinds of assignments all over the region, and Pineville seemed like another quiet mountain town tucked into its own rhythm. I booked a room in a converted boarding house near the south side and started each day walking the edges of Yellow Creek Hollow, clipboard in hand. The locals didn't talk much, but one thing came up more than once. 30 years ago, a dam upstream collapsed and drowned a small village in the hollow below. The church, the cemetery, everything disappeared under the surge. Now, there's nothing but brush and mud where the old paths used to be. Kids in town still whisper stories, though, especially one that caught my attention. They say if you hear a bell in the fog, don't look toward it. I figured it was a story, the kind that keeps children from wandering too far into the woods. That first night in the rental, I left the window cracked open and fell asleep to the sound of freight trains crossing the ridge. But at exactly 2:43 inches the morning, I sat up in bed. There was a sound, faint, a bell, light and distant, like someone striking metal from underwater. It didn't come from the train yard. It came from somewhere below the hills. The air outside was dead still. The next day, I asked around at the diner, mostly just to test the waters. When I brought up the bell, one of the older men at the counter stopped chewing. He didn't say anything, just got up and walked out the door. Nobody else answered me. The bell came again the next night. Same time, same tone. Always one clear ring, then a pause, then a second. I thought maybe it was equipment at the site echoing off the hills, or maybe something left behind from the old church ruins. I told myself that. By the third night, I started dreaming. Every time I closed my eyes, I found myself wading through black water. I could feel the stones beneath my feet, sharp and cold. And just behind me was that sound again. Closer now, right at my ear. When I mentioned it to the woman who ran the boarding house, she didn't speak. She just left a tin of salt outside my door. Opened. No note. No explanation. I threw it away. I didn't want to feed into the fear. I was here for a job, not ghost stories. That evening, while checking basement access beneath the foundation near the project zone, I noticed something odd. A narrow opening had appeared in the soil where there hadn't been one before. Fresh collapse. It led into a deeper tunnel running beneath Yellow Creek Hollow. No water, just soft silt and an odd, humming stillness. And then the bell again. This time, right behind me. I spun around. The tunnel was empty. Just the old hanging bulb above my head, swinging ever so slightly. When I climbed back up, There was a streak of orange rust across my sleeve. Wet, almost sticky. It smelled like iron and rot. At the time, I thought it came from a pipe. Just rust and moisture. That was all. But now I know better. The next night, it woke me again. Not gentle this time. The bell struck sharp, 3 times in quick succession, like it was trying to get someone's attention. I got out of bed and stood at the window. There was nothing but fog outside. Street lamps glowed in faint yellow halos. Then I saw it. A shape under the light. Too still to be windblown. Too large to be any neighbor. It did not move. I could not see its face. But the moment I squinted to look closer, the bell rang again. Loud. Inside my ears. Though every window was shut tight. I turned on every light in the house. But the bulbs dimmed, each one pulsing like they were running out of breath. I grabbed my boots, keys, and ran. I drove straight to the field office near the highway. I knew the night staff would be gone, but I needed to feel safe under real lights and steel framing. When I pulled up, the glass door was wet, not fogged, dripping, like someone had been pressed against it from the outside. I called my supervisor. The line picked up, but all I heard was static. Then a clipped voice saying, "If it rang at your door, you should not have looked." I left town that morning. I booked a motel at the far end of the county, near the freeway, far enough that I could no longer see the ridge. I slept through the night for the first time in a week. No bell, no dreams, just quiet. The silence felt like permission. I bought a bus ticket back to Lexington. One more stop to grab my field notes, and I would be done with Pineville. But when I stepped onto the gravel lot where we had marked our boundary lines, I saw it. A deep circle pressed into the wet clay, perfectly round, maybe a foot across, with a faint curve through the middle, like the rim of a bell had been resting there all night. I left without touching it. The bus ride was slow and winding, dipping through hills and ghost-colored fog. I sat near the back, close to the window. Sleep came hard, but eventually I drifted. I dreamed I was back in the flooded hollow. But this time I was not alone. There was a man at the edge of the water. His neck hung loose, like it could not hold his head straight. He carried a bell in both hands. His skin was the color of old slate. His eyes met mine through the glass, and I heard the bell again. But not through my ears. Through the dream, I woke up gasping, the bus still moving. No one looked at me. No one had noticed. When I glanced down, a thin line of water trailed from beneath my seat. Just a trickle, but it ran clean across the aisle, all the way to the rear door. 2 months later, I was working in an office, cataloging contracts and scanning paperwork. I did not take jobs that brought me underground. I turned off every ringer. I stopped using alarm clocks. Sometimes, late at night, someone rings the bell at my front door, and I always wait 5 minutes before I even breathe. It is not the sound that frightens me now. It is what comes after it stops. My name is Evan. I was 30 years old when I came back to Welch, West Virginia, for the first time in 15 years. Not for a reunion or anything sentimental. My mother had passed, and it was time to clean out the house on Mine Street before the property fell apart completely. Mine Street sat near the top of a crumbling hill just above the old mine shaft. Most of the houses up there were empty now. Some collapsed, others leaning like they were holding their breath. Only 2 still had people in them. Ours, and the one across the way where Cal lived. Cal had been my best friend back then, and somehow he had never left. My sister Haley came with me. She was 34, is a little more practical, a little more tired, and the one who had handled most of the hard conversations when Mom got sick. We had both promised to clean the house fast and leave town by the weekend. But the first night back, something was already off. Haley was sorting through the closet in Mom's old sewing room when she found it. A stuffed rabbit, faded blue fur, one eye missing, and a new stitch along its neck, like someone had sewn the head back on recently. She turned to me and said, "This is Danny's, isn't it?" Danny had been Cal's little brother. He disappeared in 1998. No one ever found out what happened. There were searches, posters, candle vigils. Nothing. All that was ever recovered was that same stuffed rabbit. If you grew up on a street with something buried underneath, and you ever go back, let it sleep, especially when the only thing left behind is a toy that knows how to wait. I brought the rabbit across the street to Cal the next morning. He took one look at it and froze. Then he said, "I buried that thing behind my house last year. Myself." I saw the hole filled and covered. The three of us walked around back. The dirt was turned up, crusted in spots, but clearly dug from underneath, like something had pushed out, not in. That night, Haley said she heard laughing in the living room. A child's laugh, soft and breathy. But when she checked, nothing was there. The windows were shut. The front door was locked. The next morning, Cal admitted something had been bothering him too. He had been hearing footsteps on his roof at night. Light ones, like someone pacing slowly. He also heard his name called more than once, always from the direction of the mine. We found the basement window open when we got back to the house. Mud tracked in across the concrete, but only a single pair of small, barefoot prints. I wanted to think it was a raccoon, but raccoons do not laugh, and they do not open latches. We set up a camera by the hall closet that night. Around 2 a.m., the light flickered and the feed glitched. For a second, we saw something. Just a pair of eyes, too round and too still, watching us from behind the wall. Then the bulb blew. We barricaded the windows, locked every door, moved 3 mattresses into the living room and stayed together under one lamp. Waiting. At 2 a.m, something crashed in the basement, a heavy bang, followed by slow scraping sounds. I grabbed a flashlight. Cal was already on his feet. We opened the basement door and stepped down, one stair at a time. The door at the bottom stood open. We had bolted it earlier. I was sure of it. Inside the basement, the air was thick. Something was wrong. A section of the wall had collapsed. Behind it was an old mine tunnel, half sealed with age, now broken open. We pointed the light into the tunnel. Something stepped into view. Small, holding the rabbit. I took one step closer. The figure dropped to all fours and scurried backward, faster than I thought possible. It vanished into the dark. Then the wall behind us shifted. The ceiling cracked and the rocks came down, sealing us in. The dust choked us for a few seconds. I could barely breathe. Cal kept yelling, but his voice echoed strangely off the tunnel walls, like the sound had nowhere to go. When the air cleared, we realized the collapse had sealed the way we came in. There was no going back. We aimed the flashlight down the tunnel. It was narrow and jagged, just wide enough to crouch through. The dirt under our feet was soft and damp. Every few feet, we heard something shift just out of view. Then the laughter returned. Not playful. Something broken in the rhythm. It echoed from 2 directions at once. Cal stopped. His hands were shaking. He said, "I hear Danny. I swear it is him. But it does not sound like it used to." We moved faster. A faint tapping started along the tunnel walls. 3 knocks. A pause. Then again. Always 3. I swung the light toward the sound and caught a glimpse of movement. Low to the ground. A shape the size of a child. It darted into a side tunnel. I ran forward and slammed the flashlight into the shadows. The light struck something. It gave under the blow with a wet crack, like hitting damp bone wrapped in cloth. Cal screamed and grabbed my arm. He pointed toward a narrow exit. We pushed forward. Something grabbed my wrist. The fingers were cold, thin, nails sharp enough to scratch. I pulled back hard, but it held on. Cal kicked at the wall beside us. The stone crumbled. A gap opened just wide enough. We dove through, just as the hand let go. The rocks behind us caved in, sealing the tunnel shut again. We lay there on the dirt, gasping, faces slick with sweat and dust. Cal had a scratch across his cheek. My wrist burned where it had grabbed me. We left that house the next morning. The stuffed rabbit was sitting on the front porch when we opened the door. Clean, upright, waiting. None of us had unlocked anything. I picked it up and took it with us, thinking maybe it was safer not to leave it behind. But halfway down the mountain, I changed my mind. I opened the window and threw it into the woods. That night in the motel in Beckley, I walked into the bathroom to splash water on my face. When I looked up, there on the mirror were 3 small finger streaks, just enough to draw a smiley face. And I swear the glass rang softly, like someone laughing behind it. My name is Nico. I grew up in Bluefield, the Virginia side, and I moved back when rent in Roanoke got too steep and my last freelance contract dried up. A friend tipped me off about Winters Row, an old strip of row houses that used to be for coal families. Most of the buildings were sealed up or leaning too far to trust. Only one still had working power and plumbing. House number 11. I moved in the last week of October. The wiring buzzed sometimes. The water came out with rust the first few seconds, but it was quiet and cheap and no one bothered me. When I mentioned the address to folks in town, they would nod and say something like, "Oh, that place. Nobody stays there long." Then they'd change the subject. I do not believe in weird houses anymore. Most of the time it is just old pipes or bad insulation. But now I know, when a rope drops from the ceiling and it was not there the day before, that is not a mechanical issue. The first night, I heard footsteps above me, not in the hallway or on the porch, right above the bedroom. I figured it was rats or raccoons, until I remembered there was no attic access, no stairs, nothing but a flat ceiling. The next morning, I checked the room. Something hung down right in the center. A thin cord, like old bell rope, with a small knot at the end. I pulled it gently. It did not budge. I went to get a ladder from the maintenance shed and cut it with a box cutter. 3 days later, the rope was back. Same place, same length. No ladder marks on the wall. No footprints in the dust. I checked the ceiling panel. It was shut tight. This time, when I touched it, a static shock jumped into my fingers. Nothing painful, just enough to make me yank my hand away. I left a camera running overnight to see if anything moved. At around 3 in the morning, the footage warped. The whole screen fuzzed like an old VHS. Just as the rope began to sway side to side, I showed it to a local repair guy the next day. He used to live on Winters Row, but not in number 11. He looked at the video, then looked at me, and said, "I used to be in number 13. That cord, it does not pull things up. It only pulls things down." I thought he was trying to scare me, or just saying something weird to avoid the question. Then the power went out. It happened around midnight. No wind, no rain. I grabbed my flashlight and checked the breaker, but everything looked normal. I went back upstairs and aimed the light toward the bedroom. The rope was swinging hard, back and forth like someone had just jumped off it. There was no wind. The windows were shut. And above me, I heard the footsteps again, steady, measured, walking in circles, just above the ceiling. I stepped forward, slowly, and reached up. The moment I touched the rope, my flashlight began to flicker. It flashed once, twice, then lit up the shape. Something was hanging upside down from the open ceiling panel. Not falling, not limp, just holding there, eyes wide open, watching me. The light went out. I do not remember dropping the flashlight, but I heard it roll across the floor. My chest locked tight and my legs felt stuck. The sound above me changed from footsteps to a slow dragging, like someone pulling a chair across wood. I ran from the room without looking back. I stayed in the kitchen, sitting on the floor with my back to the cabinets. The air felt heavier with each minute, like the whole house was breathing through the cracks. I kept telling myself it was nothing real. Just the dark, just exhaustion, just the tricks a quiet house plays on your mind. But the sound followed. The rope scraped against the ceiling as it swung, then went still. A new one dropped from the vent above the sink. The end of it brushed the counter. I started laughing because I did not know what else to do. My mind split between two thoughts. One said run. The other said stay very still. I whispered up toward the ceiling, asking if someone was there. The footsteps stopped. The silence pressed in so hard that it hurt my ears. Every room I moved through, the rope appeared again, sometimes short, sometimes long enough to graze the floor, always dangling, always with the same knot tied at the end. I stopped fighting it. I sat in the middle of the living room, looking up at the rope above me. It was moving just a little, not swinging, just rising and falling, as if something on the other end was breathing. I said, "Please stop." And then a voice answered, from somewhere in the ceiling. It said, "Your turn." The house hums. Every wire seems to buzz at once. The rope lowers until it almost touches my face. My hands shake as I reach for it, but I cannot stop. The air smells like dust and metal. I hear the whisper again, closer now, like it is inside my head. It says, "Pull." The lights explode into brightness and then vanish. My body moves before I think. I grab the rope, pull it once, hard. Something heavy shifts above me. I hear a deep scrape, like wood splitting open. A rush of air pours down from the ceiling, and something brushes my shoulder, cold and wet. I fall backward, the rope wrapping loosely around my arm as it drops beside me. The ceiling closes on its own, sealing the opening again. The rope hangs still. They found me 2 days later. A maintenance worker came to check the power and saw me through the window, unconscious on the floor. The rope was looped around my neck, not tight, just resting there like it had been placed. I told the hospital staff it was an accident, that I tripped and got tangled. They did not believe me, but they let me go. I moved out of Bluefield after that, found an apartment in Richmond. But every time I walk into a room with an old light fixture, my hand goes up automatically, reaching for the ceiling to check. I cannot help it. I sleep better only when someone else is in the next room. The quiet still makes my skin crawl. Before I left, I sent an email to the new tenant of number 11. I did not explain much. I just wrote one line. If the rope comes down, do not touch it. And whatever you do not ask who is on the other end. That one hit a little different. If these stories mean something to you, leave a like, subscribe, or share this video with someone who'd stay up to hear it too. And if you've got a true horror story of your own, my email's in the description. Now, story 6. When I came back to Hinton with Dell, it was supposed to be simple. We were there to sell the house my aunt left behind, stay just long enough to sign papers, maybe argue a little, and leave. The town looked smaller than I remembered, flatter in the fall light, like a memory dulled at the edges. We booked a room at the Crestline Hotel because it was the only place still open in the off-season, and because, deep down, we both remembered it. We stayed there once on a school trip. The building was older than it looked, built close to the rail line that used to bring tourists through before people stopped caring about towns like ours. The sign above the entrance was painted over, but not well. Faint letters still showed beneath the coat of gray. What you could read said, "There is no oppressed." Then the rest blurred into streaks. Dell laughed the first night, sitting on the edge of the bed, her back to the bathroom mirror. Said it felt like we were haunting our own past. I laughed too, but it didn't feel like a joke. The room smelled like old steam and carpet glue, and something about the silence outside made me feel like we were too far in to get back out. I slept lightly, if at all. Around 3 in the morning, I thought I heard footsteps in the hallway. Not loud, just steady, slow, like someone unsure if they should turn back. I sat up and listened, but the steps faded just before reaching our door. The next morning, Dell found something strange. In the hallway, one of the paintings, a water-stained sketch of the Riverwalk, slid slightly when she leaned on it. Behind it was a small wooden panel, a door, about chest height, set into the wall. We asked at the desk downstairs, and the woman just stared at us like we were trying to start trouble. She said there was nothing behind that wall. No extra rooms, no doors, no reason to ask. Dell gave me a look, the kind that said she did not believe a word of that. It started to come back in pieces. Then, that hallway, that corner of the hotel. I had been here before, not just as a teenager. More recently, maybe during the 2 days I went missing, back in 2020 and 2015. You know that feeling. When you look at a room and your gut knows it better than your eyes do. When a space feels like it's trying to remember you, but it can't quite get your name right. That night, I went back to the front entrance and scraped at the paint with the edge of my key, just enough to uncover the full message. I stared at it for a long time, whispering the words under my breath. There is no record of your stay. Is Clasper Place. Dell left around midnight. Said she needed to breathe, to clear her head. But I knew what she meant. She was afraid of me again. Not the loud kind of fear. The quiet kind. The kind that grows when someone you love starts making less sense, the longer you look at them. I went back upstairs, to the hallway with the painting. This time, the little door was already open. I stood there for a moment, unsure if I had opened it earlier or if it had always been waiting. I ducked through. It was more of a crawl space than a room, lit only by a flickering bulb overhead. The walls were lined with photographs, not framed, just tacked directly to the wood. Old pictures of hotel guests, some smiling at the check-in desk, some asleep in their rooms, some standing just where I was standing. I found one of me and Dell from years ago. We were sitting in the breakfast lounge, holding cups of cocoa, but I had no memory of that moment at all. There was a tape player in the corner, dusty and humming softly. I pressed play. Cam, if you're still listening, don't go any further. The voice was mine. A loud click echoed behind me. The door had shut. The bulb overhead dimmed and began to flicker. My breath caught in my throat. I started pulling at the walls, looking for another way out. Behind one loose board, I found a narrow hallway. It curved around in a tight circle, lined with 7 wooden doors. Each door had a number, and each number had a name. Room 1, Darren B., missing 1995. Room 2, Ellen H., missing 2001. And so on, until I reached room 8. The plaque read, reserved, and underneath that, a printed name. Dell. I felt something break open in my chest. Not fear exactly, but something heavier. Something that whispered maybe I had done all this before. I kept moving and found a service door at the back of the hallway. It opened onto a side street, and the light from the morning sun nearly blinded me. I made it back to the car. I called Dell. She answered. She was already miles away, voice shaking. I told her everything, or at least what I could say without scaring her worse. We both agreed never to talk about Hinton again. But before we left, I walked back one last time. I stood across from the hotel, lifted my phone, and took a picture of the sign. I wanted proof, something to keep me grounded. When I zoomed in, the message had changed. It said, "There is no exit." That night, I dreamed I was in room 8, not just standing in it. I was living there, sitting on the bed, holding an old album I had never seen before. Inside were photographs of people I could not name. But then, one slipped loose and fell to the floor. I picked it up. It was Dell, in the room, looking straight at me. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. I grabbed my phone. Every picture I had taken in Hinton was gone. all except one. The hotel sign. The message was different again. You're still staying here. We moved, changed our numbers, left the state, but I still check every hotel sign we pass. Every time. Last month, while driving through Tennessee, we passed a roadside inn. Faded name, broken neon, crestline. Dell asked what I saw on the sign. I told her nothing, but it said, no memory left to leave. I'd been running loads across the spine of the Appalachians for 15 years. Never liked the night shift, but it paid better and kept me out of city traffic. That week I was hauling an empty reefer back down from Lexington to Knoxville, figuring I'd make it through before sunrise. Around 2 in the morning, somewhere east of Jellicoe, my dashboard chimed and the fuel light kicked on. There weren't many stops on that stretch. My GPS showed nothing ahead for at least another 30 miles. But just then, an old roadside sign blinked past on my right. Mile 58 gas plus service. The kind with the flickering plastic letters and a leaning metal frame. It wasn't on any of my updated route maps. I turned off the highway. The ramp dipped into a narrow curl of trees, and at the bottom sat a single gas pump island. Like something from the 90 seconds. The air smelled damp and metallic, and there was no music. No lights beyond the weak amber bulb above the door. I didn't see any cameras. Just a rusted service cabin and a pump that still took cards. Barely. I figured it was unmanned. Maybe one of those old-time service stations that never quite closed but didn't welcome visitors either. Still, I needed fuel. The tank wasn't going to wait for a prettier exit. I slid my card in, heard the click, and started filling up. The office beside the pump had a single window, half fogged. I couldn't see inside clearly, but I thought I caught the edge of a counter, maybe a chair. On impulse, I walked over and gave the door a push. It creaked open. No one inside. The place smelled like oil and mildew. A little fan spun lazily in the corner, doing nothing. On the far shelf, tucked beneath some faded road maps, a CB radio crackled quietly with static. That's when I heard it. A whisper threaded in the fuzz. Don't let 'em see you refillin'. It didn't sound like a broadcast. More like someone leaned too close to the mic without realizing they were on air. The voice was low, male, tense. I stood there for a moment. I'm not sure if I imagined it. But the fuel clicked off outside. I shook it off, walked back to the pump, and topped it to full. Old gas. Maybe. The nozzle smelled faintly sweet. Not fresh. I put it back and grabbed my bottle of water from the cab. I still needed something to keep me awake. So I went back inside. There was a cooler behind the counter with some off-brand soda and a couple of candy bars. No register. Just a beat-up self-pay touchscreen nailed to the wall. While I tapped through the clunky payment app, I glanced up and saw the blank mount where a security camera used to be. It wasn't just missing. The wires had been cut and curled down like little burnt threads. Someone had taken it out on purpose. Outside, the night was still. No crickets. No wind. I stepped back into the cab and paused. The passenger door was ajar. Not wide open, just a soft inch, like someone eased it closed, but didn't hear the latch. I reached for the handle and saw the smear of mud across the seat. 2 distinct boot prints. Fresh. Damp. I didn't sit. I backed off, went around to the rear, popped the side compartment, and took out the folding blade I kept in a rag. My phone had 0 bars. I climbed into the driver's side fast and slammed both locks down. That CB hiss was back again. Truck still hot. Don't wait. You have for Mary. I didn't. I gunned it out of there. The cab rattled with the sudden acceleration, tires skidding a bit on the gravel before finding grip. My headlights swept back across the pump, and I swear I saw a shape duck behind the service shed. Low to the ground. Watching. I was 10 miles out when the left rear gave out with a jolt. The trailer bucked slightly. I eased to the shoulder and climbed out with my flashlight. Tire was gone, shredded like it hit a row of teeth. I ran my hand along the edge, found a metal spike wedged in the rubber, filed sharp and bent at an angle. That wasn't a nail from the road. That was planted. I should have known. A station with no prices, no cameras, and no voices. That's not a place built to sell you gas. That's a place no one needs to see you leave. I crouched down to unbolt the spare, flashlight between my teeth, hands greasy, back to the road. That's when I heard the first bulb shatter. My rear taillight, gone in an instant. Before I could turn, something moved from the ditch. Short, hooded, hands swinging a piece of pipe. I barely rolled out of the way. The metal pipe clipped the edge of my flashlight and sent it spinning into the dark. I grabbed the tire iron off the ground just as the man lunged again. He was smaller than me, wiry, and fast, with his face half wrapped in cloth like he was trying not to breathe the same air. He swung low. I brought the iron up hard and caught him in the ribs. He stumbled sideways into the ditch, grunting like a kicked dog. I didn't wait. I took off into the trees, crashing through brush, the branches slicing at my arms. Behind me, I heard him scramble up and give chase. Heavy breaths, feet pounding too close. I could still see the high beams from my truck lighting the road, and beyond them, another set of lights flared on, headlamps from a pickup, idling just out of view until now. They didn't honk or shout, just started rolling forward like they knew I'd run. The beams swung into the woods. A cold sweep of light scanned the trunks, slow and methodical. I ducked behind a fallen log and tried to quiet my breath. The man from the ditch pushed into the underbrush, dragging something behind him that clicked with every step. A different sound this time. Not a pipe, a blade. I had nothing left but the tire iron and instinct. So I led him uphill, to a narrow ridge where the earth broke into stone. I waited until I saw the top of his hood bob into view. Then I flung my button-up shirt loose and kicked it toward him. He stepped forward, foot tangled in the fabric. Lost balance. Slipped. He went down hard. I heard the thud before the silence. Then the slow rustle of something rolling. Sliding. Then nothing. I climbed down carefully, knees shaking, grabbed the blade he'd dropped mid-fall. It was a hunting knife, rusted, with the edge worn to a point. I kept it, not because I thought I'd need it again, because I didn't trust what else was still out there. The pickup truck was still combing the woods. I could see its lights bouncing between the trunks. But whoever was inside never got out. They just let the engine idle and the CB radio hum low. I slid along the ridge until I hit a trail cut through by a narrow rail line. The gravel shifted beneath me, but I stayed upright. Blood was trickling into my eye from a cut I didn't remember getting. I kept going. Then I heard it again. That same voice from the CB, distorted and half swallowed by static. Mile 58's closed, but we still open if they stop. I don't know how far I ran after that. Might have been 2 miles, might have been 5. I found an old rest pull on the side of the tracks and waited until morning. Some hikers passed and called the county police for me. They thought I'd been mugged, said they'd heard about people hiding in the woods near Jellicoe, but no one ever stuck around to give details. I tried to explain what happened. I told them about the station, the attack, the voice, but when they looked into it, the report came back simple. No record of a business at mile 58. No current fuel permits. No standing structure on the plot since 2019. The station had been gutted years ago. Sign pulled down. Utilities shut off. All they found was a busted CB radio cracked in a gully and some drag marks that led off the road. I finished the delivery 2 days late. Nobody blamed me. Nobody asked. I didn't take another night run after that. Now I only drive daylight routes, with well-lit stops and full parking lots. And if the CB ever crackles to life out on a quiet stretch, I switch it off. No exceptions. Some places don't show up on the map anymore. and not every station you pull into is meant for you to leave. If someone in a mountain town tells you not to bother with a map, don't listen. Not because you'll get lost, but because they don't plan on letting you find your way back out. I came to Whitesburg in late October, chasing down a half-whispered legend I heard from a regional archivist in Pikeville. Something about a pair of sisters who still lived near Ridgewalker Hollow, a name the county had officially scrubbed off maps after a landslide 20 years back. The last family to leave, the story went, had 2 daughters who refused to go, Kala and Neen Kincaid. They were twins, 28 now. No phones, no internet. They grew vegetables on the slope and traded herbs at the Sunday market, but never stayed long. When I asked about them at the post office, the clerk said, "Only. They're the last girls left from the hollow. If they invite you up, take what you need, but don't stay." Yes, the seizing. Naturally, I went. They met me just before sunrise, where the paved road ended in gravel. Kala wore a red flannel and didn't speak much. Neen did all the talking. Her voice was warm, but it curled around her words like they weren't quite meant for you. We walked past their farmhouse, through a fence made of hand-tied branches, into a forest so thick the light changed as soon as we stepped under. I asked what they wanted to show me. Neen pointed uphill, said, "The old cairn, family grave, no names, no markers, just stone on stone. Bank, that will din." We followed a narrow trail that hugged a shifting ridgeline, the kind that kept turning until you weren't sure which side you started from. The fog was already forming in the low spots, lifting in thin white curtains. After about an hour, we reached a clearing with a flat patch of ground. In the center sat a perfect circle of stacked stones. It was no taller than my knee, but it looked deliberate, clean, like someone tended it. I walked around it, took a few photos with my phone, then stepped back. The fog pressed close, but didn't cross into the circle. I asked who built it. Kala said nothing. Neen just said, "It's been here since before anyone remembered how to leave." Rang to set. We didn't stay long, maybe 10 minutes. Then Kala tapped Neen's shoulder and turned back down the trail. I followed them. The path looked different going back. Steeper. Trees on the left, where I swore they'd been on the right. After about 20 minutes, I slowed. I looked around, tried to match what I'd seen earlier. The cairn should have been just behind us. I turned back. Nothing. No clearing. No stones. Just fog. And trees. And more trail. I asked if we missed it. Neen said the fog plays tricks. Said the cairn disappears sometimes, especially when it's not supposed to be seen again. Kala didn't say anything, but I noticed her hands were clenched. She wasn't walking the same way. Her head stayed down, like she was listening for something. That night I stayed in the spare room at their farmhouse. The window faced the slope we'd just come down. I couldn't sleep. Around 3 in the morning, I heard footsteps outside the glass, fast and light like someone was circling the house. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed I was chasing someone through the trees. Couldn't see their face. The fog was thick, and every time I turned, the cairn appeared again, but taller, and one more stone had been added to the top. At breakfast, Neen looked at me and said, "We've never taken anyone up there twice." And by day, she didn't ask what I dreamed. She didn't have to. That afternoon, we went back. The sun had burned off most of the fog, but I still felt uneasy, like the light didn't quite settle right. When we reached the clearing again, I stopped. The cairn was there, but now it faced a different direction. I pointed it out, told them it had changed. The flat side of the cairn, which had faced uphill yesterday, was now turned toward the slope we just climbed. Neen tilted her head and said maybe the wind had shifted the fog, and I was seeing it different, but she didn't sound like she believed it. I turned to Kala. She stood apart from us, near a crooked tree, eyes glassy like she was somewhere else. Her lips were pressed tight together, but they trembled. Then she smiled and started to cry. At the same time, like her body couldn't decide which one came first. I spun back toward Neen. She was gone. Just like that. One breath. One blink. And she wasn't there anymore. I shouted her name and ran into the trees. But there was nothing. No sound of steps. No rustling leaves. No break in the fog. I circled back to Kala, heart thudding. She didn't look surprised. The cairn was still there, but now it was different again. A new stone had been added, small and pale, resting slightly askew at the very top. I reached out to touch it and felt that it was wet, still slick from the fog, like it had only just been placed. We didn't speak. Kala just started walking, and I followed. The trail looked familiar, but too clean, too even, like it had been laid out for this exact moment. I tried my phone. No signal. I opened the GPS app. It spun for a moment, then showed a perfect circle, traced over and over, looping back to our current spot. I felt cold all over. Every tree looked the same, but not quite. Branches hung at the wrong angles. Roots arched above the ground like knuckles. It felt like we were being studied, not watched exactly, but measured. Eventually, we found what should have been the start of the trail. I recognized a rotted fence post and a downed pine, but the cairn was there again. This time, it blocked the path completely, right in the middle of the trail. Its stones damp and settled like they'd always been there. We sat. There was nowhere else to go. I could feel the mountain waiting. Kala pulled something from her coat, a handkerchief, old and soft, with words stitched in faded red thread. If the fog won't lift, keep walking. She held it out like a gift, or a warning. She said her grandmother used to say the ridge didn't twist to confuse people. It moved to keep things in. It shifted only when someone wanted out. I looked down at the cairn and thought I heard something. A soft thump, like two stones settling into place. We waited until the sun rose high enough to push through the fog. The path ahead seemed to clear. Leaves shimmered with dew. I could see where the trees opened to the lower trail. Kala nodded, but her eyes were different. Distant, like she'd already left. I thought we were safe. I truly did. We walked down in silence. And for a while, it felt like the ridge had released us. The trees grew thinner. The air warmed. My shoulders loosened. I let myself breathe. Then I saw it. The same cairn. The same curve of stones. Right off the bend in the path we had just come through. Only this time, there were 3 rings of stone. Not 1. Not 2. 3. Kala stopped walking. Her shadow fell long beside me. Then she whispered, so quiet I barely heard it. Neen's not coming back, so I'll stay instead. Bangs bass. I turned. She wasn't looking at me anymore. Just past me, into the fog. Her face calm now. No more tears. I stepped back, told her we could still make it out together. She didn't answer. I ran. I don't know why I didn't try harder to stop her. Maybe something in me already knew I couldn't. The trees blurred past. The trail narrowed behind me, shrinking like it had never been more than a thought. I didn't look back, even when I heard the sound. Stone on stone. Slow. Careful. A new cairn being built. One rock at a time. I'm really glad you've stayed with me this far. Before we move on to the next story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you won't miss any of our new videos every single day. Now then, let's continue. The first time my phone shut off by itself was halfway up Grayson Ridge. The battery had been full that morning, but just as I reached the final switchback, the screen went black. No warning. No buzz. Just silence. It came back on 20 minutes later like nothing happened. I blamed the cold air or the elevation. Signal interference wasn't new to me. I'd been in telecom 10 years. long enough to know towers fail for all sorts of boring reasons. That was why they sent me out there. Just another glitch to fix. The repeater on Grayson Ridge had been cutting out for weeks, making phones drop signal the second you got near the summit. Local complaints said it wasn't just the bars disappearing. People claimed their phones froze, shut down, or worse, played back recordings they never made. I didn't buy any of it. Signal bounce. Maybe. Bad firmware. Sure. But haunted bandwidth. No. I figured the repeater tower was cracked or rusted out. Maybe the mount had shifted in the wind. There was a small service cabin at the top, supposedly abandoned since 1998, and that was where the gear was anchored. I reached the summit late morning. Trees had thinned out to stumps and rock, and the wind came in steady from the east. I parked my rental by the old gate and hiked the last stretch on foot. It was dead quiet up there. As soon as I stepped within 20 feet of the structure, my phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. I pulled it out. The signal was gone again, full drop, but something had opened on its own. The voice recorder app. I hadn't touched it. There was no reason it should be running, but it had already saved a file. Recording 0. MP3. I hit play. At first, all I heard was wind, then a short crackle, and my own voice. I was saying my name, not in a test tone or reading a note, just calling it, soft, like I was trying to get someone's attention. Then came the sound of slow footsteps in dry grass. Just a few, then nothing. I stood there for a long minute, trying to laugh it off. Probably picked up background noise from a butt dial. I deleted the file, or at least I thought I did. That night, back at the motel on Main Street, I checked my phone again. The file was gone. Not in storage. Not in trash. No trace. Next morning, I asked the woman at the phone repair shop if anyone else had trouble with strange recordings up on the ridge. She looked at me over her glasses and said, calm as can be. It never records right the first time, but it always gets clear the second. I smiled, nodded, and walked out, but I couldn't shake what she said. I went back on day 3, brought a proper handheld recorder and my work laptop with diagnostics loaded. I didn't expect anything weird, just wanted to finish the job. You'd think I'd know better by then. I used to believe signal interference was the worst a tower could do. Now I think the real danger is when your phone works too well, when it starts answering things you never asked. The cabin looked the same as before. Low tin roof, moss on the edges, door hanging slightly open like it was waiting. I set up my gear just outside the threshold and switched on the diagnostic recorder. My phone was already in airplane mode, tucked in the glove compartment. I powered on the handheld. 4 files popped up immediately. I hadn't hit record. Each was time-stamped within the last 48 hours. The last one was marked with that morning's date. My chest tightened. I opened the 4th file. For a few seconds, all I heard was wind again. Then my voice, breathless this time, whispering something I didn't remember ever saying. If you hear this, do not let it come down from the tower. The cabin was still. I raised my eyes, turned toward the rusted ladder on the side of the repeater frame, and that was when I saw it. Something low to the frame, not standing, crawling. A shape, human-sized but wrong in its proportions. Thin arms wrapped tight around the metal rungs. A head that moved too slowly, like it was listening through the bolts. It begins to climb down. One hand, one foot, careful, quiet, like it had done this before. I backed away and left the recorder running. My legs moved before I told them to. I did not stop to grab my phone, did not shut the gate, just ran. I reached the bottom of the trail, half stumbling, climbed into the car and locked every door, started the engine and yanked the laptop from the back seat. When I opened the system logs, the files were gone. All 4. The recorder app was missing too, like it had never been installed. I called my office, asked for tech support, The line rang once, then connected, but the voice that answered was mine. Not exactly mine. Slower. Off. It repeated the same sentence from the fourth recording. Then it went silent. I left everything except the laptop, packed up my motel room in under 5 minutes and drove west out of town. No looking back. About 30 miles down the highway, my phone flickered back to life. Every app restored. Battery full. As if nothing had ever happened. I told myself it had to be a firmware bug. Maybe a rogue update pushed from the relay. Maybe I imagined parts of it. That theory held up for almost 2 hours, until I stopped at a rest station just outside Moorhead to charge my phone. The moment I plugged it in, the screen lit up on its own. There was a single unsent message sitting in the queue. No contact name. No timestamp. I'm still up here. At the time, I thought it was just a filing error. Paperwork misplaced. Maybe. Happens more often than you'd think in rural mapping jobs. But now I believe some houses don't show up on official records because they don't belong to the part of the world we're meant to live in. I was 31 then, working for a regional property registry that partnered with developers scouting small towns for tourism expansion. That fall, they sent me and Eli, my colleague of 2 years, and probably the only person I trusted on the road, to a town called Damascus. Quiet place. Main Street looked like it hadn't changed since 1975. The job was routine. We were supposed to survey a stretch of older homes at the eastern edge of town, near the fork where the old road met the new bypass. Locals had flagged one house in particular. It didn't have a number. No listed owner. No tax records. But someone said they'd seen curtains moving inside. We asked around. A woman at the diner looked up from her pie and said, "That one? No one ought to go there twice." Then she went back to her crossword like she hadn't spoken at all. We found it that afternoon, just past the crossroads, tucked behind a line of cedar trees. Was a 2-story frame house with pale gray paint, a sagging porch, and weeds tall as your knee. It looked normal enough, aside from the fact that it had no visible number. Just a dent where a plaque should have been. Eli walked up first and knocked. No answer. He tried the knob. It turned with a soft click. Inside, the air smelled like dry wood and something older. The kind of stillness you only get in places that remember being full. Once, furniture was covered but not dusty. The walls held framed photos, but the faces were blurred like they'd been wiped with a wet cloth. The kitchen light worked. So did the fridge. Eli opened it, then shut it quick. "It's running," he said, like someone just left for milk. The desk did no for wises. We moved through the house slowly. I took photos for the report. Most of them came out fine, except one. It was a shot facing the hallway mirror near the stairs. In the preview, Eli was staring straight into the glass, but I didn't remember taking that picture. His posture was stiff, and his expression blank. I looked over at him. He was at the other end of the hall, facing the opposite direction. We left not long after that. Back at the motel, Eli was quiet. He kept rubbing the edge of his palm like something had gotten under his skin. Later that night, we were filling out notes when he said something that stopped me cold. "You remember when we first came through here?" "Lorna." His knot was paper card. I looked up. "What did you just call me?" "It's C1. He blinked, then shook his head. "Sorry. Don't know why I said that." He said 9. I picked up my phone, intending to jot down a timestamp for the entry. A new message notification blinked on the screen. No number, just a blank contact and a single line of text. "Lorna didn't leave last time. Why should you?" We went back. I don't know if I was scared or angry, but I needed to know what was going on. Eli didn't protest. He was pale and distant, like he'd started fading at the edges. The house was exactly as we left it, except for the drawings. The living room wall had sketches in charcoal, spread corner to corner. None of them had words, just scenes. People wandering in fog, a figure kneeling at a doorway, and one drawing near the baseboard showed a woman stepping away from the house while something watched from the upstairs window. I turned to Eli. He was frozen in place, staring at the wall like he could read it. A tear slid down his cheek, but he didn't move, didn't blink. When I looked back at the sketches, I swear there was a new one that hadn't been there before. It showed me leaving the house alone. I grabbed Eli by the arm. His skin felt cold through the fabric of his shirt, like he had been standing in snow. I said his name twice before he blinked and looked at me like he was just now waking up. He asked what we were doing there. I told him we needed to go, that this was a mistake. He followed, but his steps were uneven, like he had forgotten how to walk on floors. At the front door, he paused and looked back over his shoulder. The house was silent, but it felt full, not of people, of moments, like something had already decided what came next and was just waiting for us to realize it. Back at the motel, I called the company to check our report queue. The address Eli had entered wasn't there anymore, not even listed under archived entries. The task itself had vanished from our assignment log. I opened my GPS notes. The coordinates pointed to a blank zone marked in gray. No street name, no lot data, just a blinking label. Known zone. We decided to stay one more night and leave first thing. Neither of us touched our dinner. I kept my laptop open, flipping through the photos from earlier. Every single one had gone blank except for the hallway mirror shot. That one had changed. Now both Eli and I were in the frame, standing at the threshold, not smiling, just watching each other through the glass like we had both forgotten who we were. Eli said maybe we imagined it all, that we were just tired. He smiled when he said it, but his eyes never reached me. Sometime after midnight, I dreamed I was standing at that crossroads again. Fog rolled across the asphalt. The house stood, waiting, quiet and familiar, like it had once been mine. I woke to an empty room. Eli was gone. His things were still by the bed. His keys, his bag, but no sign of him. I ran downstairs to the front desk, asked if they had seen him. The clerk blinked at me and pulled up the registry. There was only one name listed under our room. Mine. No record of an Eli ever checking in. I drove straight to the town office, in heart in my throat. Demanded to see the permit list, the assignment orders. The woman behind the desk frowned. "There's no one here named Marla working that case," she said. "But we do have a Lorna. These break you, rebel." I stood there, frozen, hands shaking. Then I ran. I drove back to the crossroads. The house was still there, but now there was a number nailed to the siding above the door. 13. I stepped onto the porch, not knowing why. The door creaked open before I touched it. Inside, on the hallway wall, hung a photo in a black wooden frame. It showed Eli and me, standing on that very porch, side by side. I don't remember posing for it. I live in Knoxville now. Changed my number. Switched jobs. I keep to cities, avoid country roads, and never answer listings with unnumbered addresses. But sometimes, when I pass a strange house on a corner with a crooked porch or peeling paint, I catch myself counting the numbers out loud, just to be sure there is one missing in the middle. And in my wallet, tucked behind my ID, is a scrap of paper I don't remember writing. The ink is slightly smudged, the handwriting too neat to be mine. If you're reading this, try not to answer the door. The house knows you now. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I truly mean that. If you enjoyed these stories, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. That way, you won't miss the next ones. And once again, thank you for walking this dark road with me tonight.